At the 600-day mark of the conflict, we felt it was absolutely critical to take a pause and reflect on the state of the art of all the displacement patterns that we're seeing at this mark, and really to reflect on what kind of programming is needed with no end to the conflict in sight. And so bringing together experts, members from civil society, the diaspora, academia, UN agencies, governments, to talk about what they thought were the key issues and what should be key recommendations was really our aim with these last 2 days.
This is a very lucrative business. Criminal enterprise which attracts a total of $150 billion every year. You can imagine what that means to the traction.
Anyone who has a question for this excellent panel.
Is the question of scale of atrocities committed by different actors important or not?
I think on the takeaways for the humanitarian programming, it's about using the data to be much more targeted, much more adapted, not just to the needs, but to the areas where we can work.
The response towards Sudanese refugees is so silent. There's no attention. There's no effort.
The reason why I stood with my background as someone who fled before to support them as a generation for the future of South Sudan. As a refugee-led organization working directly with them, we are part of them every day. We feel what they go through. So that's why I'm seeking the attention towards their problem, not the numbers.
I think it's important to make sure this response, be it humanitarian, be it development, take into account the human rights-based approach. That's how we can actually give basis to those numbers. Because, for example, in the case of Ethiopia, we are talking about 90,000 plus Sudanese refugees and asylum seekers. So those numbers are not just numbers. They talk about unique stories. They talk about the human rights violations.
When you compare the Sudan situation and the number of refugees it has produced in only 600 days, we have never seen something like this. And that's a very, very important element that we need to highlight. We should not think that this is a movement that may be contained if we do not address the real issues, peace, ceasefire, and addressing issues such as risk of trafficking.
The situation is getting worse. The big question is why? What could be done to stop that?
It's important for me because I feel like I'm in the gap between the humanitarian agencies and the community, because I live in the community, and when it comes to confidentiality, because they know I went through the same thing, they are more open to me. They talk to us, they come to our office, and I'm able to also advocate on their behalf and be able to refer them to agencies I know they can get assistance.
Basically, I've spent almost 2 decades in a refugee camp, and it wasn't easy, let me say, because of the ongoing conflict back home, and also the life in the refugee setting. We are restricted, we have limited resources, and also we are in a dilemma on what lies ahead also in future. Being a refugee, especially a Sudanese refugee at Kakuma refugee camp, it is near the border. So we are still afraid because sometimes people are still coming in. You never know who is the enemy, and sometimes they can disguise themselves even as refugees.
It's uncomfortable to compare vulnerabilities or to compare people's needs and catastrophes.
I'd like to tell you the story of Mariam, who I met in the course of last week. She felt desperately unsafe, and so she, on her own with her 5 children, very small children, fled from Omdurman on a very, very long, convoluted route, more than 3 months, most of the time on foot. And at that point, she had literally nothing. They were taking the earrings out of her ears, they were taking the clothes off her back. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was we had been giving distribution of various basic items, and she had had to sell a blanket in order to buy a spoon so that she could stir the food that we were providing for her. So, I think that just highlights the level of vulnerability that people are at this stage of the conflict.
Some of us are not fortunate enough to secure chances to get abroad through the UNHCR processes, so it is difficult. But on the other hand, at least we got a formal education, and also there are some pathways like the Talent Beyond Boundaries which availed itself, and now I'm in it. That's also a good progress, and we are hoping it works out, because this is the only way out of this camp for me.
They don't have security, they don't have basic rights. So what has been done? And what's the future for those refugees?
If I have one recommendation for the policymakers as an outcome of this conference will be, I think, to look at it from a holistic point of view, really looking and taking the trajectory of movement from Sudan and to Sudan from before the war and also have a foresight for what will happen after the war. I don't think that Sudan will be safe for at least 5 years, even if the war stopped today. There is a serious corrections need to be considered and taken actually before people will be really fully able to move back.
The most important thing is to do a contextual analysis of the needs. It's really important for us to predict potential movements and understand the impact that those risks had on the specific population. But in reality, because the context in our countries is completely different, we need to take this into consideration.
There should be an effort to stop the support for these militias in Sudan. How to do that? It is not easy, we know. But hopefully, with the recommendations of this conference, we can reach some points.
If we really want to look at migration from different perspectives, then we really need to talk about skilled workers. We need to talk about enabling the environment within the country to give people reasons to stay, and also have a pathways where people can actually be able to go get education or skills and then come back again to feed into the country.
But imagine if the conflict continues for a year, another 2 years, if it's not 600 days, if it's 1,200 days, if it's, the tension and pressure on the host nations needs to be recognized by the international community, and they need to be supported. There's a heartstring piece to this. There's a real politics piece to this. So it's very important to feed into those bigger discussions so as that hopefully at some stage the right decisions can be made.
I hope for a permanent solution to all this war, so that the suffering of women, children and men can stop and they can finally have a place to be that they call their home. It might not be easy for them to go back at the moment, but wherever they settle in, they should be able to have that peace of mind, to hear it from the experience of the war that they went through.
In terms of having adequate infrastructure to respond to the catastrophe and to the protection crisis, we believe if there is a local capacity and the local structures are able to respond, first of all, the response will be immediate, but also it will be sustainable at a national level.
It's no surprise how intense the discussions were, given the gravity of all of the issues that we've been discussing. And I think one thing is definitely clear. Well, a number of things are clear. It's that we need more cooperation and more support, and we have to continue to advocate to keep Sudan high on the agenda.
When there is war, there is no progress. I just need a harmonious Sudan that we used to have.
The Sudan that I dream of it is Sudan of freedom, peace and justice, especially Sudan that satisfies the needs and inspiration for all young people and women who participated strongly in the revolution.